Hi folks, for those who don't know me, my name's Nick Ray. I live in Tobermory up on the Isle of Mull in Scotland, and I was due to be speaking to you at Odyssey's 25th anniversary celebration, which sadly, as we know, has had to be postponed because of this dreadful viral pandemic sweeping the world. So hoping that you're well and that you're safe and that you're keeping yourselves well, and that nobody has been badly affected or unhappily affected by this dreadful virus. But I didn't want to let the moment pass. I wanted to give my presentation, put it up on YouTube, and hopefully most of you will be able to watch it, and maybe other people as well. I mean, maybe there's a benefit in that I'm reaching a wider audience, and who knows, when the next party comes around, I may not be invited to speak, so at least this way I get my word in. But it's a huge honour for me to be asked to speak to you. I really do mean that from the bottom of my heart. A huge honour to be speaking to you because I hold Odyssey in huge esteem. I mean, the work that you do or we do is incredibly powerful, incredibly necessary. It's a simple process, but with very powerful results. And the reason Odyssey is celebrating its 25th anniversary is because of the success of the model and the success of the staff who work together to produce these courses and deliver these courses, and then the participants who come along and embrace the opportunities that they encounter, add to that whole experience. And yes, it is an honour for me to be part of the celebration, but to be marking the celebration by speaking to you. And in a way, it's a culmination for me as well in terms of my outdoor development career. I mean, I'm in my late 50s, and to be asked to speak to my peers and to people who really understand what the outdoors can mean for people is a powerful experience for me, and I want to acknowledge that. So I'm going to be speaking to you about my sea kayak journey in 2018 when I paddled the three peaks, not literally paddling up the peaks, but I paddled the three peaks, those being Ben Nevis, Scafell Pike and Snowdon, in the month of May, early June in 2018. And I did that as a fundraising venture for Odyssey. It was a 520-mile journey. I undertook it on my own, solo. It was mostly unsupported in that I carried all my food and I was self-sufficient. But certainly for Scafell Pike and for Snowdon, I was offered assistance by friends, and it was great to meet up with people and share those two mountains with good friends. But I want to talk about my journey. I want to talk about what it meant for me and how I think it fitted in with the ethos that we espouse and succeed with Odyssey. And I hope that what I offer you now rings true for you and resonates. So this is the camera bit, and then from now on will be the presentation bit, and then I'll hopefully be able to wind up with the camera bit at the end. And so you don't have to sit here and look at me all the time and me look at the camera and feel very self-conscious. Okay, I think that's about it. We'll get stuck into the presentation. Okay, here we are. Got the slides up and ready, and now I'm just recording straight into my microphone, not being filmed. The first two slides are the ones that show my actual route as delineated by my GPS tracker, starting off obviously at Lochiel and then ending down at Abu Dhabi. And it's a straightforward route really, down the west coast of Scotland and west coast of England and the west coast of Wales. But there were a number of points where I needed to be particularly careful. The Mull of Kintyre, the Mull of Galloway, the Solway Firth where the tides run very fast, Liverpool Bay because of the sea traffic, and Llyn Peninsula because there's another tidal race there. But generally, the route was a fairly benign route. It wasn't one that was going to cause me any huge amount of concern. So in terms of planning the route, to be honest, I didn't worry too much about going into the huge nuts and bolts of working out different tides and different routes, etc. I'm a fairly experienced expedition paddler by now anyway. I've done quite a bit of paddling, so I was able to realise that I'd probably meet each day as it came and make a plan as the day emerged and as the day panned out. But nonetheless, I did spend some time looking at the route well beforehand, and I needed to know what to expect at the Mull of Kintyre and Mull of Galloway. I have paddled around them before, but it's always good not to be complacent. One of the things I haven't spoken about yet anyway is my mental health, and my depression is a major feature of my life, so much so that I've been hospitalised on many occasions because of my clinical depression. So this journey, in many respects, became a rite of passage because of that. When I set off from Lochiel, I don't think I was 100%. Well, I know I wasn't 100%. And to be honest, I wasn't sure whether I was ready to actually undertake the challenge from a mental health point of view. I think I was still struggling with, quite a bad dose of depression. So when I set off from the shore of Lochiel, my heart was not fully in the expedition. I was feeling quite nervous, and I think deep down I was looking for any opportunity to find an excuse to say to my folks or to folks, I don't think I can continue because I was looking for the weather to be bad, for example, or something to happen that would enforce an early retirement from the expedition. So I wasn't 100%, I have to admit. So, as with all expeditions, setting off is an important part. It's the moment when I leave a place of known comfort and I embark on a journey of unknown experiences. So, literally launching into the unknown. I mean, I know that I'm going to be kayaking, and I know that it's going to be tidal, and I know that the weather's going to be challenging, but I still don't know exactly how I'm going to face the experience ahead of me. So the first moments of the trip are always the moments that I find quite testing. After leaving Lochiel, I had a very short passage through to Fort William and set up a early camp, camped at the base of Ben Nevis, and then set off really early in the morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, to get up to the top of the Ben for 5 o'clock to see the sunrise. Though unfortunately it was very misty when I got up there, so I didn't actually see the sunrise, just this kind of unearthly glow as the sun sort of burnt its way through the mist. So by the time I was descending the mountain and the hordes were beginning to come up to meet me, it turned into a beautiful sunny day. So I was back on the water by 10:30, I think it was, and I still had another 20 miles of paddling ahead of me, which is important really because I still had the tide with me to get me down through the Coral Narrows. So that was helpful to get up the mountain nice and early and back down, and then another 20 miles paddling. The weather was superb for the first couple of days of the trip, absolutely superb. Couldn't have asked for better. Beautifully calm seas, almost mirror calm in many respects. Lovely tides sweeping me down from Loch Linnhe through to the Firth of Lorne to the top of the Sound of Jura, and then down through the Sound of Jura. So the first couple of days it was lovely. Had a lovely encounter with an otter on one camp, and when I was camped with the Isle of Ling there. I was having my coffee at about 4:30 in the morning, just as the sun was breaking, and this otter sort of lolloped across the grass towards the tent, and I sat stock still, and it sort of peered into the tent, looked up at me, peered into the tent, almost as if to say, what a complete mess you've got your tent in. And then it turned tail and lolloped back down to the shore and disappeared in behind the rocks. So it was absolutely a magical moment. I didn't take any photos because I thought if I moved to reach for my camera, the animal would run away. So it was just a lovely, intimate encounter. Paddling down from the Isle of Ling down towards Corrie Vrecken, and the Sound of Jura there. Sorry, I just had a slight brain freeze there, and the Sound of Jura. So you can hear in the short video the sound of the water as the different tidal streams all meeting together, and the different upwellings of water and surges and the boils, and the kayak sort of spinning slowly in the tide. Absolutely lovely. So that's the top end of the Sound of Jura. And then paddling down the Sound of Jura, the wind began to change, the weather began to pick up. And so by the time I got down to almost level with gear, I had to come ashore because of the weather. And I had a day ashore at Teyn Lone because the weather was just too strong for me to paddle. But the following day I did put to sea again and headed off down, hoping to reach Machrihanish. Yeah, so the sea was very uncomfortable coming down from Teyn Lone. So I only managed to do about 8 miles that day. There was a point when I thought, if I capsized, it would be a good excuse for the expedition to come to an end. And, for a moment, I just thought of allowing myself to do that. But so there was some element of self-preservation that kept me going, and I managed to see a skerry which protected the beach from the surge, and I managed to get behind the skerry and land on the shore and spend the night ashore. Beautiful sunset that night, though. Beautiful night out. And then the next day was a big day, going down to the Mulla Kintyre, and I had to get my tides spot on for this, because if I got there at the wrong time, I didn't want to get caught in the big tide race that runs around the Mulla Kintyre. So it meant leaving at 3:00 in the morning from where I was camped to get down to the Mull just as the tide was turning. And I was really pleased with myself because I did it. It meant getting up at 1:00 in the morning, because it takes me roughly 2 hours to get sorted out before packing the boat and being on the water from actually getting up. So it meant getting up at 1:00 in the morning and being packed and ready to leave at 3, and paddling off into the gloaming as the day was just beginning to dawn. And absolutely fantastic. The whole world around me was asleep, and eventually woke up as I paddled, through the early hours, and actually made it down to the Mulla Kintyre just as the tide was turning. So I was really pleased with that effort that I put in there. And I think because I'd achieved that, my confidence was enhanced hugely. I think just after that one early start, I sort of reconnected with that part of me that was, I suppose, robust enough to see the challenge for what it was. So getting around the Mulla Kintyre, that was good. And then I was faced with a decision on how I was going to cross the Firth of Clyde. Was I going to go straight across the mouth of the Clyde? Was I going to hop across to Ailsa Craig and go around that way? Or because of the winds, would I have to paddle further up into the Clyde and then cut across via the Isle of Arran, which I really didn't want to do. The winds were blowing quite hard, tough to make a decision, but in the end I decided to go straight across to Ailsa Craig. So I sat out the wind for the first part of the morning and then jumped onto the sea around about lunchtime, and it was a 19-mile crossing to the island, but I'd always wanted to go to Ailsa Craig. So in a way, I was fulfilling an ambition anyway, and managed to get across to the Ailsa Craig in really lovely conditions in the end. This beautiful lump of rock sticking out of the sea, quite incredible, with the bird life just sweeping around it and sort of welcoming in squadrons of gannets sort of flying out, and almost as they were going to guide me in, greet me and guide me in. Cacophony of bird sound, puffins in the water around me, gannets wheeling around the sky above me, guillemots, just thousands and thousands of seabirds. And that was lovely, just landing on this island. Yeah, so coming in and landing here on Ailsa Craig with its lighthouse, which had been automated in the early 80s. So it's quite strange landing there, and looking around the lighthouse, almost as if it just been walked out and abandoned, 20 or 30 years ago. There were beds and broken TVs and cutlery and plates, and you can walk around the rooms and get a feel for the lives of the lighthouse keepers out there. It used to be a quarry as well, where they quarried granite for the curling stones they used for curling. No longer used, but I do think there is a repository of Ailsa Craig granite somewhere where they continue to make the curling stones from. But the great thing about Ailsa Craig is the wildlife, absolutely incredible, and bird life especially. Beautiful view from the top, lovely sunsets from the top. But again, the wind was high, and I found myself sitting out the first part of the day, the next day, because of the wind. The wind was blowing about force 5, force 6, and it was just too strong for me to paddle from Ailsa Craig across to the mainland, Ayrshire mainland. So I went for a wander around and just explored the old castle high up on the hill. Managed to find a good water source, birds' nests galore, bird life galore, slow worms as well. It was just an incredible place, and that sense of solitude as well. But there was a sad encounter when I was out walking. I found this gannet, which had obviously broken its wing very badly, huddled up on the rock, shivering away its last moments. And it moved me considerably, because I saw this animal, this bird. Obviously, nothing could be done for it. I mean, I didn't have it within myself to put it out of its misery. And it suddenly struck me that humans, we have the ability to choose how we live and choose how we face our own mortality. Whereas this poor bird was faced with mortality. There was nothing it could do about it, and there was nothing it didn't know. I should think it didn't know how it would end its own life, so it just sat there on the rock waiting for the inevitable to happen. But it struck me very, very clearly that with my own melancholy and my own depression, that I do have a choice about life. I do have the choice to fight for my life. I do have the choice to seek medical attention. And that is where the parallel is, I think, between myself and so many other people who struggle with enduring health problems, not only mental health problems, but problems and illnesses like cancer or other illnesses, that we can choose to fight these head on and face them and seek the medical attention and the medical help that we can embrace and help us to see through these dark times in our lives. So, as tragic as it was to see the gannet, it was an enlightening moment. So on from Ailsa Craig, across the mainland, and then further down south, heading south. Then had to get around the Mull of Galloway, and that involved another early start. So this was the theme for the trip. This was a very early start, again, just as the moon was setting. to get down to the Mulla Galloway and around before the tide changed against me. But also I arrived there just as the tidal race would have dropped away, and I could just sneak round the corner, which I managed to do. It meant I got down to the Mulla Galloway really early, which meant that I had a long crossing ahead of me across Luce Bay. It was a 17-mile crossing, but having made the tidal gate around Galloway, it meant that the tide would be against me going across Luce Bay. So the first hour I had the tide with me, but right in the middle, by these odd rocks called the Skares, the eponymous named Skares, the tide turns against me, and all of a sudden I found myself paddling through treacle, it seemed. I was just not making any headway whatsoever. The tide was, if I stopped paddling, I would drift backwards, and I was barely making 100 metres, it seemed, an hour, and my spirits just plummeted. And it was a hot day. I'd run out of water to drink. I'd drunk all my water, so my throat was parched. The coastline that I was trying to reach was still a full 10 miles away. It was just a speck on the horizon, and I've seriously considered just turning around, turning tail, and heading back to the Mulla Galloway, just letting the tide take me back, and I'll just crash out on the Mulla Galloway. But for some reason I stuck it out. I kept paddling forward, and the words "this will pass" sort of entered into my mind. And I remember when I was in hospital with my depression, the nurses would always say to me, "Nick, this will pass. This your depression will never be with you all the time. This moment will pass." And so this adage stuck with me, and there I was in the middle of Luce Bay fighting this tide, and I realised that this would pass. The tide would not last longer than 6 hours, and within 6 hours I would have the tide with me again. All I had to do was just hold my position, stick with the discomfort, hold with the discomfort, be discomforted, and lo and behold, within a few hours, a couple of hours, the tide eased against me, and I began to make headway, and before I knew it, I was cutting across the last couple of miles to the Isle of Whithorn, and there I was setting up camp. And it was just one of those enlightening moments. So from that moment on, I suddenly found myself really embracing the challenge of this expedition. That I'd sort of come through those unwritten tests, and I'd found my pace, and I'd found my place in the whole scheme of things, really, I suppose. So ahead of me I had the Solway Firth, an area of water which can be quite confusing. The tides do run strongly there, but they're also quite confusing in how they run and where they run. So I paddled up into the Solway Firth. I was thinking of crossing from the Isle of Whithorn straight across to Whitehaven, but again the winds were forecast to be very, very strong. So I paddled into Solway Firth against a strong 4-6 wind, and ended up in this place called Rascarroll Bay, and landed. On the map it looked perfect, but when I landed it was just this boulder-strewn bay, and again seemingly like a kilometre of boulders to clamber over. And I landed in the pelting rain, and the wind was howling, and again my spirits were at their lowest ebb, and all I knew I had to do was to carry all my kit over these huge boulders and find camp, a few hundred metres over these boulders. And I was unloading my rucksack rather miserably when a pair of wellies came into my line of sight, and this voice said, "Do you want a hand?" And it was a young lad who had wandered across. They'd got a holiday cottage sort of up overlooking the bay, and he'd seen me struggling, and he'd come down. And so angels do come wearing wellies, I decided. And this young lad with his sister helped me carry all my stuff over these boulders and carried the kayak over these boulders and let me camp in their garden, and sat with them for the evening and chatted. And then I camped, and then the next day they saw me off, after giving me a nice hearty breakfast and saw me away. So again, it was another salutary lesson that, when the chips are down, there are moments when, kindness occurs, kindness of strangers, and it's an amazing circumstance of events, really. So then crossing the Solway Firth, reaching Cumbria was an iconic moment for me. Iconic. It was a seminal moment, I guess. It was a moment when I realised that I'd completed the Scottish leg, which was quite a tough leg, and now I was almost halfway. So I landed and stopped at Workington, and then from Workington around the coast, St Bees, past Sellafield, and then landed at Drigg, where I was met, where I landed, and then Tony and Ali Purcell came and said hello to me, which was nice. And we had a shared wee dram, which I twisted their arm to have with me, just to celebrate. And the next day I was going to do Scafell Pike, and I was met by my cousin, who had driven all the way up from Preston to help me out. He lent me his bicycle, so I cycled up to Eskdale Youth Hostel, where I met Alan Hinks, and he'd agreed to be my the patron of the trip, just to add gravitas to the journey. So he and my cousin Simon and I, from the youth hostel, went up and climbed Scafell Pike with all the hordes of people. But the Upper Esk route is a lot quieter and far more picturesque, even though it's a bit further in. So we climbed up to Scafell Pike and met Jim Dominy, another outward bounder, on the summit. We sat up there, had our lunch, and said our farewells, and scootled back down through the mist, back down to the youth hostel. And then I hopped onto the bike and rather leadingly, my legs were rather leaden, cycled back down to Drigg and spent the night there, and then set off the next day. I was going to have a rest day, but then I decided not to, and I set off get down to further, the South Cumbria coastline. And then from there, it was basically West Coast, Lancashire. Beautiful early start again to make my way down past Blackpool, and then across to Southend, and that was quite a lumpy crossing, the Ribble estuary, and then this landing on the Southend beaches there, and this dispiriting haul of kit, and that literally was over a kilometre of sand up to a place where I could camp the night, and then the next day I have to carry it all the way back down, because for me to work the tides out, I had to set off at sort of low water to make sure that I had the tide with me to get me across, or help me down through the Liverpool Bay. So Liverpool Bay was a challenge for me. It's funny how I sort of built up these moments of concern, because I was really worried about the shipping, and it was busy. There were pilot boats zooting in and out of Liverpool Harbour, Port of Liverpool rather, and these ships were moving in and out quite rapidly. But to be honest, I didn't need to be too worried. I managed to get across the shipping lane, and then across the bay. It's quite a shallow bay, so the sea was quite uncomfortable, past the wind farms, and eventually landing up to Staton. And that was another good day on the sea. Now I felt really close to my destination. I could see Snowdon. I was within breathing distance, it felt like, of Snowdon. So from Staton, after a beautiful sunrise, paddled round Great Orme, and then found my way into the Menai Straits, and then up to Carnarvon, and camped just on a really rocky campsite, where Anne and Robin came and met me which was fantastic. And they brought goodies, which was lovely. Fruit, fruit and fresh water, which I was desperately in need of. And again, I had to wait for the tide there. And so I had to wander around Carnarvon, which was nice, and then managed to catch the tide out through Carnarvon Bar and around to Pont Lyfni, I think it was. That's where I camped. And the next day I met Hugo, who lent me, he brought up Robin's bike, because I borrowed Robin's bike to cycle from the coast up to Beth Gelert. Oh, Rhyddhau, sorry. What am I talking about? To Rhyddhau, where I was to leave the bike with Hugo and skedaddle up Snowdon. And I managed to get up Snowdon pretty quickly, actually. Just a couple of hours to get up there, and then scooted down to meet Hugo down at the Ranger Hostel, I think it is. The Ranger's Path, I think it was. I feel like calling it the Lone Ranger, but it wasn't. Snowdon Ranger, that's it, of course, the Lone Ranger. And then again another leaden cycle back. Yeah, another lead-legged, another lead-legged cycle back to the coast, where I met up with Hugo once more, and he brought me a lovely pie. And Gary and Jock came and said hello, and it was great that that they were there to greet me. And then that was it, last leg. So in effect, I'd completed the 3 peaks, but I wanted to get down to Abu Dhabi and finish my journey there. So the next day was a very long day. I needed to get down to the Llyn Peninsula to get round the Brechy tidal race at the right time. So again, another very early start. Managed to get round the Llyn in good order, and was deciding where to camp, whether to make it to the Tudwell Islands and camp there, or camp somewhere around the Llyn Peninsula, somewhere around there. But as I came round and paddled towards the Tudwells, I encountered hordes of motorboats, speedboats, and jet skis, and I just decided that there's no way I wanted to be anywhere near all these folks roaring around. So I just decided there and then to paddle across to Shell Island, so across St David's Bay. So sorry, St David's Bay, Cardigan Bay, to Shell Island. And so that was a 55-mile day, that was. Really quite a big day for me, the longest day I'd ever done in a sea kayak. And, it was a good day, 88 kilometres in the end. So I landed at Shell Island. Again, very, very busy. It was the sound of a disco in the background. But camped on the beach and slept soundly through the night. And had my final day paddling up to Abu Dhabi. I tried to paddle as slowly as I could, because I kind of said I'd be there about lunchtime, but I think I was so fit by then, no matter how slowly I paddled, I kind of made quite good progress through the sea, and reached Towin, and eventually met up with Hugo and Nick Dawson in the Outward Bound craft. And then a very strange feeling sort of paddling across into Abu Dhabi, into the Dhabi estuary. Estuary that I knew so well from my Outward Bound days, and here I was arriving back by sea kayak and seeing, the wharf, the jetty, seeing the colourful village, and seeing the hive of holiday activity. And here I was, sort of arriving, sort of 520 miles later, having left Scotland, just a month before, and had a lovely warm welcome. Just the kind of welcome that I was hoping for when I finished the journey, enough to feel like I'd been recognised, that my achievement had been noted, which was important for me, that sense of recognition, but no huge fanfare either. I didn't want that either. I didn't want the red arrows streaking through the sky or a band welcoming me in. It was lovely, just the right note with Anne and others, and Robin and Des. It was lovely to see Des there as well, and other folks came to meet me, and just the right finish. And then, as with all these expeditions, you happen to have to pack up and get things in order. Went back to Hugo's for a barbecue and a few drinkies, and celebrate with a few drams of whiskey and a fine selection of whiskies that we had, and just talked through the expedition with folks. It was just lovely, just a lovely finish, the whole trip. But it was a really, really fantastic trip for me, a trip where I had really been encouraged to challenge myself. Well, there's my account of kayaking from Fort William down to Abu Dhabi. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll just finish off with a few insights, I suppose. I think for me the journey was indeed a rite of passage in many respects. Even though I'm in my 50s, it was an opportunity for me to be really challenged, face challenges that I expected but didn't expect that I would gain so much insight from them as a result, particularly around my mental health and my recovery process from my depression. I think the greatest insight really is that even though the symptoms of my depression may continue or exist, I have the ability to build myself above that and to lead a normal life, to rise to the challenge, and to be who I want to be, so that my illness doesn't define me, so to speak, that I am not my illness, that the illness is itself. It is depression, that's what it is. And this is hugely important for me, hugely important. And it's hugely important because I think it mirrors many recovery processes where people are facing an illness, particularly illnesses that are life-threatening as well, that may be incurable or may have a chance of remission, but a chance of maybe returning or being cured altogether. But seeing ourselves as separate from that illness and seeing ourselves for who we are, I think that it was the lesson that I learned from this big journey. That although we face these struggles and these challenges in our lives, we have it within ourselves to overcome them, and that the difficulties will pass, even though the illness may not pass. The difficulties within us will pass, and that's important for me. And I have to acknowledge that it's not a linear process, that it will always be going backwards and forwards, up and down. So rather a somber, serious ending to that presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. It's a pity I couldn't have given it to you standing up in front of you, and I think maybe I would have been a lot more coherent and probably explain myself a little bit better. So if you have any questions as a result of this, or there's anything that's emerged from what I've spoken about, I do have a website which I'll put in the link, as they say on these YouTube vlogs, a link in the description below, and you can contact me through my website if you want to, and that's via email, and we can have a chat. Be happy to chat to you and answer any questions that you have about the trip. So to finish off with then, thanks very much for listening, and because it's Odyssey's 25th, if you can, find a glass, raise it, slange. Here's cheers to Odyssey, and here's to another 25 years. And thank you for inviting me to speak to you and celebrate this moment with you. Thank you. Cheers.